The book of Proverbs contains more financial wisdom than most MBA programs, but almost nobody reads it that way. Solomon, the wealthiest man in the ancient world, wrote these words not as devotional poetry, but as a practical manual for building and keeping wealth. And buried inside these ancient verses are 5 principles that your financial advisor doesn't know, your church never preached, and that behavioral economists are only now beginning to confirm with data. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to read Proverbs differently forever. I spent years studying these texts in their original Hebrew context as a pastor and theologian. Then I spent years studying wealth psychology and behavioral finance. What I discovered is that these two worlds are describing the exact same human patterns, 3,000 years apart. Solomon saw it first. Let me show you what he saw. Principle 1, Proverbs 13, verse 11. Dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow. Read that again slowly. Solomon is not talking about honesty versus dishonesty in the way we usually think. The Hebrew word here, translated dishonest, literally means money that comes from thin air, money that appears too quickly, money that hasn't been earned through the slow process of value creation. And he says that money vanishes. 3,000 years before compound interest was formalized as a mathematical concept, Solomon described its opposite, the destruction that comes from wealth acquired faster than the person can absorb it. Behavioral economists now call this sudden wealth syndrome. Studies of lottery winners show that within 5 years, the majority have returned to their previous financial baseline. Or worse, inheritance recipients who receive large sums without the framework to manage them typically dissipate that wealth within a generation. Solomon named this pattern in 900 BC. The principle is this: wealth that grows gradually grows permanently. Your income, your savings, your investments. The slow accumulation is not a consolation prize. It is the mechanism itself. Automate it, repeat it, ignore the noise, little by little. That is the ancient code. Principle 2, Proverbs 11, verses 24 and 25. One person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. This is the most counterintuitive financial principle in all of Scripture. And it is the one most ignored by people who are struggling financially. The tight fist, the hoarded resource, the withheld generosity. Solomon says that posture leads to poverty, not because of some mystical divine punishment, but because of something behavioral science has now confirmed. The psychology of scarcity produces scarcity. When you operate from a closed fist, guarding everything, releasing nothing, you are operating from a poverty identity, and your financial life will conform to that identity over time. Here is what the research shows. Generous people who give systematically, consistently, freely, out-earn their non-generous counterparts over time. Not because generosity magically attracts money, but because generosity is a signal of abundance thinking, and abundance thinking drives the decisions, the relationships, and the opportunities that create wealth. Solomon saw the mechanism. He just described it in different language. The principle is this: generosity is not what you do after you become wealthy. It is part of how you get there. Build it into your financial system now, at whatever level you're at. The open hand is not a loss. It is training your psychology for wealth. Principle 3, Proverbs 22, verse 7. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Solomon did not say debt was inconvenient. He said it makes you a slave. That is not metaphor. In Solomon's world, debt slavery was a literal legal institution. If you could not repay, you, and sometimes your family, became the property of the creditor. Solomon understood this mechanism in its most extreme form, and he was warning his readers. The dynamic that makes debt slavery literal in the ancient world makes it psychological in every other world. When you carry consumer debt, your decisions are no longer fully your own. You cannot take the lower-paying job that gives you more time. You cannot walk away from the employer who mistreats you. You cannot invest in the opportunity in front of you. Every decision runs first through the filter of the debt. And the lender is in the room for every choice you make. That is slavery. It is just a comfortable modern version of it. Financial trauma, the anxiety, the shame, the paralysis that many people carry around money, often traces directly to the psychological weight of debt, not just the numbers, the subordination. The principle is this: debt freedom is not just a financial goal, it is a psychological liberation. Every dollar of debt you eliminate is a piece of your decision-making you reclaim. Treat it with that level of urgency. Principle 4, Proverbs 10 verses 4 and 5. Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. He who gathers crops in summer is a prudent son, but he who sleeps during harvest is a disgraceful son. People read this verse and hear, work hard. Don't be lazy. But Solomon is saying something far more specific than that. He is talking about the harvest window. In an agricultural world, the harvest is not available indefinitely. The window opens, the window closes. The person who works during the harvest builds. The person who sleeps during the harvest, regardless of how hard they work the rest of the year, loses. This is a principle about timing and execution, not just effort. In your financial life right now, there are harvest windows open. Opportunities that exist today that will not exist in 6 months. Skills that are in demand today that technology will replace. Markets that are accessible today that will be crowded next year. The behavioral economics term for this is opportunity cost. But Solomon called it sleeping during harvest. And he called the person who does it disgraceful, not because sleeping is wrong, but because sleeping at the wrong time costs everything. The principle is this: identify your current harvest window and work it. Not harder in general. Specifically during the season that is open right now, ask yourself honestly, what opportunity is in front of me today that I have been too comfortable, too distracted, or too afraid to pursue? That is your harvest, and the window will not stay open. Principle 5, Proverbs 15 verse 22. Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. This verse was written by the wealthiest, wisest man who ever lived, and he is telling you he needed advisors. Solomon built one of the ancient world's most sophisticated economic systems: trade networks, construction projects, diplomatic alliances, tax infrastructure. He did not do this alone. He surrounded himself with counsel. He sought input before acting. He valued the perspective of people who knew what he did not know. And yet the person who is struggling financially, the person who most needs outside perspective, is almost always the person most resistant to seeking it. Why? Pride, shame, the fear of looking like they don't know what they're doing. But Solomon, who did know what he was doing, said he needed advisors, which means the resistance to seeking counsel is not wisdom, it is pride. And pride, in Proverbs, is consistently named as one of the primary paths to financial destruction. You need financial mentors, people who have already done what you are trying to do, people who will tell you what you don't want to hear before you make the mistake that costs you everything. Not just professional advisors, though those matter too, accountability partners. Community, the kind of people who built their wealth on the same principles you are learning right now. The principle is this: isolation is a poverty strategy. Community is a wealth strategy. Find your advisors, find your people, and be humble enough to listen to them. 5 principles, 3,000 years old: gradual accumulation over sudden gain, the open hand over the closed fist, freedom from debt over the comfort of borrowing, diligent action in the harvest window over passive waiting, humble counsel over isolated pride. Solomon wasn't writing devotional content, he was writing a wealth manual, and he left it in the most widely read book in human history, hiding in plain sight, for anyone willing to read it that way. Next week on this channel, we are going to look at what Jesus actually taught about money, and I promise you, it is not what your church told you. Subscribe so you don't miss that one. And if you are carrying financial stress right now, stay on this channel. The next video is a prayer for financial breakthrough. And then we are going to talk about what Scripture says to do after you pray. Because prayer without action is incomplete. Solomon would agree. This is Scripture Wealth Code, the wealth principles hidden in Scripture. We'll see you in the next one.